Chris, do you want a water?
Yeah, that would be nice. So, I mean, I see my fellow representatives on the screen there.
Well, the one,
Yeah.
What? Oh, no, I'm good. Thank you. Yeah, I've got it.
Morgan says she's almost here, and I told her to run. Well, I just started the recording and the live stream. Ready to go. All right.
Yeah, that's a good issue.
I should tell you, we looked into the spotted frog in the Sioux Laguna, and there are no spotted frogs. So we appreciated the suggestion.
Well, it's Marcus Habitat. That's, I mean,
Yeah,
but they said they didn't care.
but that was a nice lead.
Yeah. They could put spotted frogs
Hi.
in there at some point in the future, but I don't know how you assume. No, that's thing.
There's plenty of chat if you want to look up right now. You know, I know you say it. Got to make one for Megan. You'll have one next time, Megan.
Okay, and Kathy, you do have a quorum, so whenever you would like to start, we can do that. Morgan may walk in a couple minutes late. We'll take care of her.
Michaela, can we promote Ross to a panelist?
So I'll give you a second after the roll call, and we'll allow Ross to say hello, and you can say your
Okay.
introduction.
Steve Pine.
So we have a quorum, Michaela says, she can actually count today. We'll go through roll call here. We know that Morgan Schmidt is on the way. Summer Sears is not here and is not coming as far as I know. So I, as vice chair, will be moderating or running the meeting today as best as I can. And this is my last NLA meeting. So Karen Bursvik,
I'm here.
Jim Christo,
I'm here.
okay? Chris Fries,
Here.
okay? Cassie Giddings,
Here.
okay? Dave Johnson,
Here,
Sean McFadden,
Here.
okay? Lisa Mushel,
Excused.
Chris Pearson, you can see his face. Yep. Steve Pine,
Good afternoon, I'm here.
yeah.
hello.
Rhodes,
Hey, David, how's it going?
I'm here. And Morgan Schmidt.
I'm here.
Great. Now, Dave, I know you, I wanted everyone in the room to know that today is Dave Johnson's last meeting. Dave has been with us for 4 years since the beginning of the NLA. And so I want to express my gratitude for you and all the work that you've done. I also wanted to allow him an opportunity to introduce the Ross Tinty, who is set to be appointed tomorrow night at council, as long as that works with their schedule. So Dave, you can unmute, and if you wanted to introduce Ross, you can do that.
Okay, you want to turn on your video, Ross?
Yeah, hello. Sorry, I had to rejoin as a panelist, so it kicked me out for a moment. But hello, everybody. I feel like I've been lurking in the shadows for quite some time, but it's good to sort of see my face on the screen with next to everybody. And just want to say I'll try to live up to Dave's legacy, and hopefully he should remain available to me as I might need guidance as I try to take on his role.
Well, I plan to remain available to to the whole NLA. You know, as one of the founding members, I obviously, as well as Lisa and James DeRofi and Cassie, have a history about how things happened and how we got to be where we are and how we got to be authorized as a committee, a council and committee for the city council. So anyway, yes, I plan to remain available for anybody that wants to tap into anything that I may be able to offer. But I highly recommend Ross. Ross is a member of the board of the Old Farm Neighborhood Association and has been shadowing me now for about 6 months. So he's well up on the step of where we're going and what we're doing. And I appreciate the fact that he's been willing to step up and get on board and kind of relieve me. It's been a long time since we first started organizing the NLA. And I'm truly pleased with how far we have gotten as far as being a voice that is sought and then listened to. So this being my last night as the Old Farm representative, I highly recommend Ross to take over my place.
Thank you.
So thank you all very much for your support for me for the last, I guess it's been 6 years. So I just wanted to say I really appreciate that. And I will miss you. And like I said, I'll be available. So thanks a lot.
Thanks, Dave. We'll take you up on that.
So our next agenda item is to approve the minutes from the last meeting. Anybody read the minutes from the last meeting?
Week ago.
Okay,
I'll second.
okay. Then we're good to go on that.
We have 2 sets of minutes. So we have a May 10th and then the special meeting, which is May 16th.
Are there any opposed to the May 10th?
No opposed. Are there any opposed to the special session notes of May 16th? No opposed. So I guess we approve the minutes. Okay. So then do we have any public comments? Is there anyone online that we have public comments from?
We do have a few folks. So if you're calling in or attending online, now is the opportunity to raise your hand if you would like to speak to the NLA. If you're online, you can do that by using the raise hand button at the bottom of the screen. If you're calling in, the number is *9 to raise and lower your hand. I'm seeing none.
Okay, so we'll move on then to item number 4, city and neighborhood assessment results. That's from Zavi and Michaela, 30 minutes.
Maybe I can say hi while you're setting that up.
That sounds great. Yeah, Anne's gonna kick us off. So
If I haven't met you in person, I'm Anne Orand. I work with these guys in the communications department. I'm mostly using this as an excuse to say hi. I think being in person is fantastic. And I've seen a real change in community engagement just since people have started meeting in person again. But more importantly, I want to provide a little context for their presentations. So I'm going to back it up by starting with our council goals. The reason why we're here is we have council goals that generally call for expanded community outreach and engagement. So what the first step for the communications department was to create what is Zavi's position. Zavi has the same title as Michaela. They're both community relations managers, but where Michaela focuses on neighborhoods, Zavi's focus is on equity and partnerships. So both of them, as you know, have started some assessments, and that's what you're going to hear presentations on tonight, is sort of what their findings from these assessments were. Zavi's assessment was looking at citywide outreach and engagement, and then taking some input from the community and figuring out what does the community need that we're not providing. And then Michaela will talk in depth more about the assessments on the neighborhoods and the NLA programs. And these are the starting point on which we can build future changes, future programs, projects, and come up with more opportunities. So what I'm asking you to kind of think about as you hear their presentations is listen to their themes, find the opportunities and ideas that come out of them that can help create new programs and projects that sort of help reach those council goals about expanding partnerships and expanding community engagement in general. And that's really all I had to say. I'm assuming you're all set up and ready to go.
Yeah, appreciate it. So yes, let me get my slideshow up here so that everyone can see it. You should be able to see it online as well. Okay. And with that, I'm going to give you, Zavi's going to kick us off and tell us a little bit about his assessment before I go into the neighborhood assessment.
Perfect. Good evening, folks. And thank you for that context. I'm just going to go ahead and jump right into my assessment and kind of setting the stage of what that looks like for mine. So again, working with partnerships and equity. So for me, that meant focusing with underrepresented groups in our community. And what I took away from that was understanding that that can be somewhat of like a buzzword and not understanding who necessarily that is. So I've taken underrepresented groups and their identities and broken that into 7 groups, if you will. So that is folks that identify as lower socioeconomic status, veterans, BIPOC, folks with disabilities, LGBTQ, Spanish-speaking community, and houseless. So those are the underrepresented groups that I plan and have been working with. And then my methodology with her for collecting this assessment and my information was one-on-one meetings, whether that was in person and or Zoom, and invitations to come to organizations, groups, whether that's their board. So having a standing agenda to just kind of give an understanding as to what is it that the city can do better and or what has our partnership and relationship been with the city. So that brings me to that 3 questions asked, again, asking the host the same questions. And there in the right-hand corner, you can see the first like 3-4 months, working with 30+ organizations and around 50 folks asking and doing the same thing and collecting notes and themes from that. So the next slide, won't go into too much detail, but those are the groups that I worked with and kind of organized them into underrepresented organization groups, Spanish-speaking community organizations, so organizations and groups that work specifically with Spanish-speaking or folks in the community, and then some organizations that have overlap, so Spanish-speaking folks within an organization that also serve one of those other identities mentioned. And from that, I was able to collect themes, and a lot of the themes that I got were just lack of understanding. So from that, I took an education component. Folks wanted alternative methods of engagement. You know, some of the sentiments around that were too much language. We don't want to do another survey and have some more like visuals. Again, building personal relationships with these target audiences. So be a better partner. So listen what do folks need. It takes time, and then collectively working together with some of the, again, sentiments around that theme. Maintain consistent presence with the community. One of the things that I found was that folks felt that it was very extracting. So again, we only come to community when it is we need something, and what does it look like to kind of shift that? So again, sentiments around that were just to be at events, a place where community events can be shared, so a place that we can kind of learn and realize like where can we show up at, and then again, take it slow, be authentic. So necessarily not leading with like an ask, and again, just kind of being there for them and showing up for them. And then there in the corner, you see other notes captured. Folks felt that they had no relationship with the city, which I think is interesting, but I think it's a great baseline because then it's like we can start fresh with that. And then folks had other sentiments within there too, again, like not enough bilingual staff or they want more, and some other notes captured in there. And from these themes, I was able to then put together proposed projects that I put together with our communications team and with other folks within the city. So again, that education component. So right now we're putting together a Bend 101 kind of campaign, but I think we're calling it Know Your City. And my portion will be creating videos of highlighting departments and kind of giving folks just a different, again, education component and a visual to what city services we provide and who does that and how to get connected. Simplifying our English at large, so figuring out what that means and what that looks like. So again, trying to figure out how to be less wordy in English. And then that also has a benefit budgetarily for translation and for other components as well when we translate into different languages. And then I won't go into each of them, but again, a lot of different proposed projects in there. A lot of them are in the works right now. There in the left corner, you will see working with Michaela and NLAs and NNAs, kind of see where my assessment can overlap and can help, and then vice versa. Understandings from Michaela's assessment to see where, again, we can overlap and work together and collaborate and work on different projects together. And with that, yeah, any questions for me about like my assessment and or my work to date? Definitely open to any of them.
Could you go over your groups again?
Yeah, I can go over them. You want me to go over the categories or?
Yeah, I was trying to write down all the categories.
Oh yeah, so the first one is underrepresented groups and organizations, so kind of at large. And then Spanish-speaking community organizations. So again, organizations that work primarily with Spanish-speaking folks in the community. And then organizations with Spanish-speaking representatives at their organization. I think a great example is like Neighbor Impact. So again, they're kind of working with a lot of those underrepresented identities, but then also have folks dedicated and or are bilingual within their organization.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Bobby, did they make any mention of neighborhood associations as you were chatting? Has anyone kind of commentary then?
That's a great question. They haven't, and I brought that off. So I've had follow-ups with a lot of these organizations and groups and have helped or kind of like proposed that kind of you should get involved in your NA. And I think you'll see from a lot of the assessment findings, there was a lot of overlap of just misunderstanding that they were even a thing and or how to get involved. And I think their opportunities are there, but I think folks are needing that encouragement and or awareness as to how to engage.
It's kind of to what it is, just in general, kind of being a mystery, and then sort of on ramps, like even if we know what it is and want to engage, then how?
Exactly. And I don't want to take away from the assessment because I've seen
Sure,
but I think something will be assessed in that of like kind of those missed marks. I think that we can fulfill. Yeah.
I'm not up to date on what percentage of the population is Spanish speaking.
For sure. So I think that in Bend, it's around 11%.
Okay.
Which comes out to about like 5,000.
Okay.
In Bend.
All right. Thanks.
Is that bilingual or exclusively Spanish?
That's a great question. That's exclusively Spanish, and then they'll probably go up with bilingual. And then I think Latino Community Association has that census information and data. And I'm happy to share that with Michaela and then get that to you if needed and wanted. And I think too, a lot of the census, again, it's if you have citizenship, right? So again, a lot of that stuff may not be accounted for within like the census data, because again, those won't be captured within that if they're primarily Spanish speaking. Any other questions or comments?
All right.
I mean, I don't know whether I should say anything or not, but it would be a lot easier to understand you if you spoke a little slower.
Yeah, Chris, and I
talk about communication.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
I don't think it was me this time.
It might have been me.
Okay, so we're going to transition into the second half of this assessment project, which is the Neighborhood Association Program Assessment. This is the one that you are all well aware of, and I have been working on alongside you for the past 5 months. For some of you, if you had attended the stewardship subcommittee meeting back in, I think was it March or April, early this spring, then you probably heard some of the beginning portions of this about how we went out and identified what groups to approach, what types of data we were getting. That might be a little bit of a repeat, but what is new today is the findings of those assessments, kind of in a more comprehensive view of what we're looking at. So I'm hoping we can get to that point. And then just so you're aware, as we're going through this, at the end of the assessment results, we're going to have an opportunity for the next item on the agenda to go through the SWOT assessment with this group. And so a SWOT assessment is a strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats exercise, and I'll be walking us through those. This is something that was originally done by the founding members of the NLA back in 2018, 2019. And so one piece of this assessment that we're hoping to include is the vision of the NLA, where we're at today, where we came from. So keep that in mind too, as we're going through some of these findings. So to start, the path that we used. So this is the methodology that I used behind the assessment. Last year, I had the privilege of participating in a Bloomberg Philanthropies innovation training, and it was a 9-month program focused on human-centered design. And so through that program, we learned the different stages of creating a product or project or program that really is most impactful for the people who use it. So what better than to look at the neighborhood association lens through and really have an opportunity for community involvement and engagement from our neighborhood associations who are doing the work every day. So this assessment on the spectrum of methodology that you see in front of you is really that pink understand the problem phase. This is where we're trying to figure out, is there a problem? If so, what is it? Conducting the in-depth research, asking all kinds of folks what they think about the problem, making sense of the data, and then looking at a true view of where we're at with this program. So in order to do that, we have to start out with the problem. And I think that you, as well as I, were able to deduce from the council language that maybe we have a issue with representation on the neighborhood associations, or at least that's something that we want to look into and see if we're truly being representative of all of our community members. So with that, I was able to move it into more of problem frame. So neighborhood associations, we struggle to engage and accurately represent members. Who is that a problem for? It's a problem for you, volunteer neighborhood boards, traditionally underrepresented groups, city decision makers, and taxpayers. And why? Well, you're out there doing the work, trying to be representative of your members, but do we have the reach for that? How are you touching base with them? Can you touch base with those folks? Our traditionally underrepresented groups, those remain underrepresented because we're still trying to figure out how to approach our own members, let alone these underrepresented groups. City decision makers who are relying on neighborhood associations to bring them a holistic view of what's happening within their community. And then the concern that taxpayer dollars are funding organizations that may not be representative of their members. So this is the problem that we think we might have that we're looking into through this assessment. In order to do that, there was a huge program review portion. So looking at the compliance forms over the past several years, not just through the pandemic, because we do recognize that COVID has been a huge barrier for neighborhood associations. Going back through to see how many people are attending those general meetings, what is the funding being spent on, who are our contacts, and how's that turning over within boards. Looking at communications grant funding, again, how much have we had? How much have we spent? Is it doing what we want? Or are there ways that we can support neighborhoods better with funding? Program history, where we came from. So, we've been around for about 21 years at this point. How does that impact where we're at today and where we look at going? We obviously don't want to retrace our steps if we have been there in the past. And then best practices in model cities. So looking forward at other cities who are similar in size or have been in our place in the past as they've grown and found ways to grow their neighborhood programs alongside them. And then in order to have a holistic human-centered design assessment, we have to look at all of the different inputs. I don't want just my opinion to be included in this. I don't want just neighborhood board opinions to be included. We needed to know, what do the community members think? Do community members even know who we are? And so we included that input as well as members who are already well connected. We've included City of Bend staff and council input, and then also the assessment that Zavi alluded to, where we now know what underrepresented groups are looking for. before we go into findings, do you guys have any questions about the methodology and this portion of the assessment? Okay. So the findings, let's start out. We, in October, as a group, the NLA, talked about assumed barriers to recruitment and engagement. As a group, we started the conversation of what are these barriers that are keeping people from engaging in neighborhood associations. From that conversation, there were about 5 concerns that we call assumptions in this that rose to the top as potentially citywide concerns. And then from a suggestion from the NLA, you told us, let's check this with the neighborhoods and see if what we're saying as an NLA is accurate and actually happening within our neighborhood associations. So we created a survey based on those 5 assumptions, and over 70 board members across the city took that survey. This just helped us get the opinions of people who are newly involved, people who are volunteering on boards, but maybe don't consider themselves board members, and those of you who are seasoned volunteers that have been here for a long time. So 1, obviously, that means does not apply as the scale says, and 5 means definitely applies. Assumption 1 was the DEI goals. You've seen these before, so I'm going to skim over them. That was the lowest with an average of 2.1, meaning that diversity, equity, inclusion, and access, maybe they aren't words that are causing confusion, but there is more to this story. We're wondering, how do we reach these groups? How do we even reach our neighbors that we know are property owners and should know what a neighborhood association is? So that is where we landed with that one. The assumption number 2 was regarding council valuing neighborhood associations. This was higher with a 3.5 average. With assumption number 3, people don't know what a neighborhood association is, the highest at 3.9. Board turnover being an issue, that came in at 3.8, so just right under that. And then the last assumption, neighborhoods are written into the code with land use being their purpose, and that was a 3.1, so kind of middle of the road for neighborhood associations. What I find interesting, and we'll go into this as we continue on, is that those points, the averages that came through, definitely came through some of these additional inputs that we collected. So the next thing that we'll talk about is the neighborhood association conversations. There were 3 main themes with challenges that neighborhood associations are having: member recruitment and engagement, board operations, and city and council support. So that echoes a little bit of what we saw in the assumed barriers to recruitment and engagement. Within that, there's challenges. So with member recruitment and engagement, there's lack of awareness of neighborhood associations. The perception is often unfavorable, need more community building opportunities, collaboration. Under board operations, we see that board recruitment and retention is continually in flux. The asks and the requirements that the city has given neighborhoods is potentially too great with little success or effect. We need more tools to support board capacity. And then with city and council support, we see a need for council and staff buy-in and support of NAs for them to be successful. And that the funding structure as it was pre-October when we changed it is inconvenient and ineffective. So I'm going to stop there. Just as a reminder, this is the themes that came out of the conversations that I had with all 13 neighborhood association boards. Do we have any questions at this point? Okay. So the next item or input that we will talk about is the communications survey. This was done originally in 2019, and it was intended for us to understand as neighborhood associations and the NLA how much trust we have from our neighbors if people want to confide in neighborhood associations, how much trust they have in the city, and then also what communications platforms are preferred for these groups. So of the findings, like top findings for this survey, 61% of the respondents did not feel engaged with their neighborhood association. Comments point towards confusion about what a neighborhood association is. 47% felt neutral towards their neighborhood associations when asked about trust. So you can see a theme is slowly developing through these results. Made my job easy as far as analyzing it goes. And then we go to our bigger community survey. So this is the $10,000 survey that we worked with an outside third party on. This one was unbranded, so you did not send it out. We did not send it out as the city. This was anonymous. Through that, we found out that 52% of respondents were either unfamiliar or neutral towards neighborhood associations. Those under 50, renters, most familiar. 24% were unfavorable towards NAs, but most of the comments point to confusion with homeowners associations. I hear agreement in the audience. 41% believe NAs currently let neighbors voice their community concerns, which could be new developments, land use, and city policies. 62% believe that's what neighborhoods should do. 53% believe neighborhoods should represent its members' views to decision makers, but only 28% believe that's currently being done. Few residents agree that their neighborhood associations make an effort to collect their opinion on important community topics. That's 20%. Include views from all of their members when communicating with decision makers, 16%. Or maintain and improve the quality of life in the city, increase community participation in local decision making, form effective partnership between the city and neighborhood residents. Those each got 25%. Only 18% of respondents say that decision makers in city government listen to the views shared by neighborhood associations. And about a quarter of respondents have accessed their neighborhood associations websites, seen information on social media about neighborhood associations, or registered with their neighborhood to be communicated with. And 18%, so a slightly smaller number, has attended an actual meeting. So those are the findings. And I realize as I'm going through that it might have kind of a negative feeling towards it. But what I want you to know and realize is that what we're learning through all of this data is that people don't know who we are. And that to me is a really good opportunity to rebrand the neighborhood associations and to make it into something that our community can utilize. I think I'll stop talking at this point and just see. Do any of you online have questions for me or in the room? Okay, so we're not done. Oh, Jim, I see you've raised your hand.
Yes, I have. And can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, this is all very interesting and also very, very good. I'm just kind of wondering what the next step is. I mean, there's just a lot of good material. And one of the things I focused on is, council supporting the NAs. And I just think there could be some discussion that we could have on, what would that look like in the future, as opposed to what was, happening in the past. I'll just use that as an example. Yeah. But just wondering where we're going from here. Thank you.
Yeah, keep that too, Jim, because when we go into the SWOT exercise next, I think that those are good questions to raise. And we can dive a little bit more into that. As far as next steps, the SWOT of the NLA is really the last piece of the puzzle as far as the research goes. And then from there, what happens is that we're going to take this, we're going to figure out, we being staff, figure out maybe what the data is saying, come up with some ideas on where we can go from here, figure out where council stands with this project, because it is a big project. And kind of take it step by step on how we include the neighborhoods in that conversation moving forward. Cassie, I saw your hand was raised as well.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. Comparing to City of Bend outreach and communications, is there any sort of data that compares to that in terms of how residents view and see how the city operates versus how NAs operate?
I'm going to give that one to Anne.
Well, if I understand your question correctly, how does the community use our outreach and communications. And the only real hard data that we have, it's so weird, I don't know where to look right now. We do a biennial survey, a community survey, and we ask community members, and these are randomly selected and representative respondents, where they get their information from. And most of them get their information from the media, followed by our website with social media crawling up close after, and then like word of mouth or neighbors and friends comes after that. So that's how I rank the value of our various programs. Neighborhood associations was not, actually this was an open-ended question, so it wasn't like a multiple choice question, and neighborhood associations did not rank up there as one of the primary sources of information about the city when we asked a random sampling of community members. Does that address your question?
Yeah, I just think it's helpful. Thank you.
Awesome. I do not know what slide is next. Yes, the SWOT. So at this point, what I'd like to do is transition to this SWOT exercise. Give me a second just to recalibrate and get the right screen up on. Oh, Steve Pine, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, thanks. I'm presuming you can hear me.
Yes.
Was that survey compared to like-sized and demographic cities or towns that have been assessed under the same condition? And how does it compare?
For the community survey?
Yes, for all that data, how does that compare to the data that was achieved by surveying other like-sized areas?
Yeah. So I still have a few conversations set up with some cities within the Pacific Northwest. And we're talking about this. A lot of the data that has come out has come later. And so my hope is that I can circle back with those neighborhoods, with those cities. Many of them have asked for the assessment data once we've gotten it. So I think they are also curious and looking at this as well. Some are ahead of us in a sense of looking at neighborhood programs and finding a way to bridge community partnerships. So we've learned a lot from that. And I have all of that info in the Miro board that you can dive into and see what other cities are doing and how it might compare to what we've heard and where we're headed.
Good, thanks.
Thanks, Steve. All right. So with this SWOT assessment, the reason that I wanted to focus on the Neighborhood Leadership Alliance is because through the assessment inputs, I didn't really ask neighborhoods how they were feeling about the NLA. I think it's one piece that is missing, and there were some comments that came through and observations and just even conversations that have happened with the NLA about how we operate that has spurred me to wonder if we need to revisit this as a committee, especially because it would affect you after hearing some of these. So what I'm going to do is go through these comments and just read them out so that you can have those in mind as we go into the SWOT. And then I'll tell you what our first set of questions is going to look like. Some of you might have said this, so you might be quoted, but I tried not to call you out. So I've heard that the NLA is unlike other advisory committees in its makeup and doesn't feel like it fits within an advisory committee structure. In order for the NLA to be successful, there needs to be alternates. Alternates need to be able to participate and vote on their neighborhood association's behalf. Consensus building is very difficult with 13 very different NAs. Majority votes, and especially majority votes from a quorum, which would be 7 NAs, shouldn't be indicative of what the majority of all NAs support or oppose. NLA reps want a balanced discussion. They've expressed feelings that hearing only from city staff is not helpful and presentations may feel choreographed. They want to invite outside presenters that can present views that could be contradictory to city council and city goals. Providing 3 candidates for an NLA for an open seat is asking a lot of the NAs. And then there's a comment in here that says, since that comment was posted, that the requirements have changed. Understanding that the NLA was intended to be more of a consultant to the city council, it serves a real purpose, but agrees that council should pay attention to NLA input. The NLA and NAs both have a lot of special interests that are outside of policy creation, land use, and city programs, such as parks and fire evacuation. All are different. We often have a lineup of topics that we prioritize, with council goals first, the strategic plan, and then presentations are usually initiated by city staff and not requested by the NLA. Dialogue, even, so this was a comment from a conversation. Even the NLA doesn't respond to public comment. It would be worth relooking at amount of dialogue within the meetings. An idea regarding assumption 2, which was the NA value to council. How about the city council and NAs commit to an annual or biannual meetings, or perhaps split the NAs into 2 groups and have the council meet with each group? It would bolster the credibility of the NAs, reduce the dilution of the NAs impact caused by the NLA layer that is between the 2 bodies. We need the NLA and the NAs to work together on recruiting. This has been approved by council. A broader, positive, community-wide NLA vision would help support positive, constructive engagement for this group of neighborhood association leaders and their neighborhoods. Not all of the NAs include reports from the NLA representative in their board meetings and agendas. So many of the NAs did not even know about the assessment. The intended 2-way conduit might be broken. Information is not getting back to the neighborhoods from NLA members. Staff is doing this communication for them. The lack of recognition or follow-up on public input. NA surveys do not seem to grab council's attention, and current makeup of commissions only amplify current council goals, not necessarily NA or community member goals. No interaction between committees, NAs, HREC, ECC. We have the largest number of contacts, but no one is communicating. Some NAs find it difficult to put someone with no NA experience in an NLA position without some time on the board. Council isn't using the NLA to the extent that they could. NLA representatives want to talk about best practices and lessons learned for NAs. They do not feel the NLA gives them that opportunity. It is not built for discussion about NA operations. They're directed by staff to bring these items to the NART. But this is often not satisfactory for NAs. And then NAs often want to begin projects or talking about issues before it's appropriate for the NLA to do so. For instance, the climate friendly and equitable communities conversation. This causes frustration because the NAs feel it's too late in the process to make a difference. By the time it's on the NLA agenda, they want a place to coordinate statements to the state as much as they want a place to coordinate statements to the city council. And that is it as far as comments that have come out from the assessment. So what I'm hoping to do is to look at this SWOT with this objective in mind.
Kayla, can I clarify? Just, I think you said this.
Absolutely.
Those are comments from NA folks about the NLA, or
Yes.
also NLA comments on NLA?
Yeah, also NLA comments on NLA.
Program.
Yeah. So as you know, I've been speaking to a lot of you behind the scenes and asking, how are you feeling about where the committee is at? And so that is something that has been incorporated into those comments. And the hope is, while we're going through this SWOT, that we keep this objective in mind. How do we create a neighborhood leadership alliance that's a resource for neighborhood associations and maintains a working relationship with city decision makers? It is. Oh, I was going to give an overview.
How much fun to be a young child in it.
So for those of you who are online and in the room, I just want to let you know the layout of this. So there is a box for each: strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. For strengths and weaknesses across the top here, that's typically your internal focus. So how we view ourselves as a committee. And then for opportunities and threats, that is a outside perception. So keep that in mind as we go through these. And we're going to start up here with the strengths. So we can talk about all of the things that we do well. And I am going to scribe. So there's some prompts on the screen that I'm not going to read to you. I just want you to be able to use those as you throw ideas out there. And I'll do my best to capture those. So Kayla, if you don't mind helping with the raised hands, just so that I can scribe at the same time.
You know, I can turn the angle of these if that.
Make it a little bigger, Michaela. I think it's the size.
Oh, thank you.
We all are confused about where to look and how big it's showing up on screens.
Yeah,
Yes.
thank you.
I won't, I'll try not to.
So with that, I'm going to set you free and you can do the talking and I will do the listening. Unless you need help.
We have talented NLA representatives
Talented.
with diverse opinions.
I think we have a high attendance rate. Sort of pertinent to what Zavi was saying, be present.
High attendance at your board meeting? Is that?
No,
or
here.
high attendance.
Yes,
At the NLA.
yeah, at the NLA.
Oh, at the NLA.
This is all
Okay.
NLA focused, I think.
I know this was slightly contradicted in some of that feedback, but I think access to county or city staff and presentations from folks that are working on projects that are relevant to our neighborhoods is really priceless.
I was going to say the presentations have been really good. I've learned a lot.
I think piggybacking off of that too, it's helpful then to have a face and a name to contact to follow up with. Say, hey, when the Wilson Roundabout project is happening, now I know somebody at the city that I can refer my NA to.
And I tend to turn around and share the information I get with my NA. And so I'm more of a conduit. And so I know other people are appreciative of that information as well, because they share that.
Thank you.
Staff response, kind of going, I know I bring up lots of things that come up, like, oh, what was it? The citizen service request, as an example. I wanted to know what we got in our NA and where they were. And so I knew, kind of got a handle. And the response to that was to come up with a map and a way to figure it out. And the NA and the NLA was a mechanism to do that. And so that has been helpful to me.
Cassie Giddings has her hand up.
Cassie, go ahead. We can't hear you if you're talking, Cassie.
Sorry. Okay. We have a citywide perspective from all neighborhoods now that we have developed over the 4 years that I've been on this committee, that I think has created consensus on what are some of our top priorities.
Created consensus on top priorities.
Correct.
On top of that, I'd say just that there are issues that are experienced by multiple NAs in town, or if not all of them. So for instance, I attended a city club presentation on fire resilience, and they mentioned that the Auburn Butte neighborhood was training neighbors to help assess their defensible space around various homes. And I was like, that's awesome. You know, we can get great ideas from each other because we're connected.
Cassie has risen her hand again.
Cassie.
No, it didn't.
I guess related to that.
I didn't. It's not raised. Sorry.
Is the sharing of information. Because even though the reports took a long time, that's where I got a lot of ideas from what other NAs are doing that I could replicate or steal.
We can come back to as we start thinking.
Cassie, did you raise your hand again?
I thought I lowered it. Sorry.
I'll just say like staff support is invaluable.
Okay. Let's move on to weaknesses. So for you guys, what could we do better and improve? What are we criticized for or receive complaints about? Where are we vulnerable? I'm sorry. So touchy.
I have a question related to that. Is it's not clear to me how the agenda is set.
Okay. Oh, Chris.
There he is. As I've been chair of the board, it's been confusing to me. What does the Narc do? And what does the NLA do? It seems like Narc in our neighborhood deals more with land use, and we deal more with homelessness. So, you know, why are there two committees?
Well, NARC is sort of a self-established committee, isn't it? It's not chartered by the city.
Right. There is a NART is a different one, but NART was also the group that got the NLA started. And I think the intent was that some of those like best practices, that collaboration, coordination would be taking place in the NART group. And that NLA would be focused on council actions and agendas and citywide issues of concern. So there was supposed to be a little bit of separation between those. And one is obviously city ran or city supported. And the other is just a group of neighborhood collaborators. So.
In my neighborhood, I don't think that folks see any relevance of the NLA to the neighborhood. I don't know if that's a soft enough way to put it, but not much interest. And there's not much, oh, that pertains to me, a feeling of connection.
My neighborhood is probably the opposite, that we have a lot of what is perceived as citywide issues, and they want me to bring it to the NLA.
Okay.
And then because of the work program being so busy, it doesn't ever rise up to that level, and then it doesn't happen, and then they get frustrated.
Okay, so I'll put that, I was gonna put it under strengths, but I think you're right. I think it's citywide concerns often last on priority.
Jim Christo has raised his hand.
Jim.
Yeah, I think one of the things that could improve is if we have better coordination with the city, especially with, you know, new hearings and laws coming up. It's kind of gotten very difficult in the last 3 or 4 months to keep up track with everything that new that's coming down the pike. Thanks.
Thank you. Chris, you had your hands.
I actually think our biggest fundamental problem in Old Bend is lack of a venue. I know if we had signs out, come here, 7 o'clock, people would come. But we're stuck in a little office with people virtue or in a home, much worse during COVID. That's probably improving. But if there's some way the city could help with.
Yeah, I'll make that a note.
20, 30 people could meet.
Yeah, and let's keep in mind, this is
20 or 30.
like we're keeping the frame of like, this is the NLA that we're talking about, but I'm gonna note that so that I can see how I can help you.
I would agree with that. ONA does have a venue, but I don't think it would. I think if you could get opinions from a group of people, many of the unrepresentative community type folks, they would say, I do not feel comfortable in this meeting room. I know I do not feel comfortable in the meeting room that we have. It's at the Elks. The walls are lined with pictures of old white guys and dead animal heads.
I've been there. I know what you're talking about.
Dave Johnson has his hand raised.
Dave.
I think it's important for people to understand that NARC created the NLA. NARC was put together to instruct new NAs on best practices. It was intended to be a forum where those best practices could be shared, discussed, segmented, but it had absolutely no teeth. And what NARC wanted at the time was to be relevant at the city level, because the city was not attuned to listening to NARC as a counseling committee. And it was NARC that invented the NLA, and those of us that were charged with creating the NLA were doing so at the behest of NARC and with NARC's total support. And I think it's seriously still important that we have the two different committees. We've got one that listens to the NAs and, by the way, listens to NARC. And at least in the Old Farm District, we get inputs from what happens in the NARC meetings. And so I think it's important that NARC is still there to discuss NA level similarities and differences. But the NLA is there to look at citywide and council input. The council was never required to listen to NARC, and even at the best of times, NARC only got to talk to city council once a quarter and didn't have much time to do it. It was like 3 or 4 minutes per quarter that NARC could talk to city council, and the council was never required to get back to NARC with anything that we had presented. And that was why the NLA was created, to have teeth, and it was several council members that facilitated the creation of the NLA specifically for that reason.
Thank you for that background, Dave. Go ahead.
I always spoke up, didn't raise my hand. So
Oh, no, please. Raising hands is a Zoom thing, but it's been 2 years, so we forget.
I think where we're vulnerable is, I know I had my challenges when city staff at NLA wanted us to go back and survey our members about a certain issue, the timing, because we used a survey in our newsletter as an example, and our newsletter is done on a very scheduled 1 week before our board meeting kind of thing. And so it was really challenging to us to go back and survey membership. And then we had a discussion, well, we can't really survey them the way the city thinks we should survey them. So are our board members representative of our membership, kind of like the city council? Do we take a survey then of our board members? How do we come to what does the membership want? And then that applies on a larger issue too, is how do we know what our neighborhood wants? How do we get that information, and how do we ask that question consistently across NAs in a fair and equitable and diverse manner? Would be our vulnerability as well.
Michaela, that feels like a couple of separate sticky notes to me, because those are like, oh, they're good.
When I think along those lines, the bind that I feel as an NLA rep is speaking to some of those challenges we've identified of underrepresentation of certain groups. And then people feeling like they're maybe not represented by the NLA or by their NA. So I'm trying to figure out a way to represent maybe the viewpoint of more underrepresented groups, but noting what Karen said, that it's hard to know what those things are. And knowing that representation might be counter to or not feel representative to those who have the ability to be most involved and most engaged. So it's a self-fulfilling kind of process of like trying to represent diverse viewpoints as best as we can hear them, when that's still a growing edge, I think, for us. But then those diverse or maybe different viewpoints don't represent those of the people that are most engaged. And they don't feel represented, and it undermines.
Kathy nodding her head there. She's dealing with that too.
Yeah.
I just kind of wanted to add the land use working group, which is not NLA, but is very active in land use. The good and bad of that, I wanted to add to that last comment, is that sometimes that's representative of certain people, but it might not be representative of all the NAs. So then how does that represent, how does the name how does the NA name being used as a whole? Do you know what I'm saying? It's like, who's representing who?
Yeah.
I don't know how to put that in a concise way, but it's like, I think there's different people with the different agendas. I just wanted to kind of bring it up because I think it gets confusing sometimes as to how that works. And I believe that's why NLA has been good, because we are codified and we're required, to follow certain regulations that I think City Council appreciates. And so then it's understanding, how does that information filter into NLA, or how do we work with that information so that different groups are being represented? But I don't know, I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, no, I think I understand. So it sounds like, and this has come up before in the comments, you probably saw the comment that said it's hard to build a consensus with 13 very different neighborhood associations. I know there are some neighborhoods that have felt that, when we sign a letter as an NLA committee, we should be putting all of the 13 neighborhoods down and what their vote was on that letter. So yeah, I hear you. And I think that gets into that representation of like, each of you want your autonomy, but how do we represent a united front to the council? Is that kind of along the same lines, Cassie, or am I way off?
Yeah, I think somehow we could we could work on that. So that's kind of what I'm saying, is we can do some work on how we can better manage that process.
Okay.
I think that brought up for me something I could go back on the strength side, and this predated my time on the NLA, but was kind of rolling out as I came on, was I think the NLA's ability in the land use working group to create like tools for people to actually engage. So I know that like that primer basically on how to engage with the land use system, which is not a clear cut, easily accessible kind of system that we have for people that don't have all day to pour over it. I think that's incredible to be able to create those kinds of tools so that people can have more access to the way things work.
I'm kind of interpreting here, but what I'm also kind of hearing between what you two both said is that there is a strength in the land use working group or communication system. Not, like you've got it under weaknesses for different reasons, but I seem to be hearing that there's some value to that. That's it, unique.
There's value. It's just understanding how we are represented.
Value, but confusion.
Okay. For time, let's move down and start talking about opportunities and threats. So again, these are more of the external facing opportunities that we think we could have, as well as the threats, and we'll get there in a second. But for opportunities, what opportunities do we know about but haven't addressed? Maybe that's things that you heard within the assessment that we talked about, or assessment findings. Are there emerging trends that we can capitalize on?
I guess, Zob, you've connected with a lot of groups and people, but my question is, as an individual NA, to me, a lot of it's personal relationships. And so they're now establishing a relationship with you, but how do we translate that to an NA? And do we really want all 13 NAs? I mean, to have these relations, I don't know how that would work. So to me, that's an opportunity because it's all new. It can be whatever.
Yeah. We are.
Yeah, I would say that it could be perceived that we were going to dilute
I was going to say the NSSP was a real winner, I guess, and that was an opportunity that gave the public a way to see how they could provide feedback to the city. And then there's like forums that were developed for feedback, and I think that was a great opportunity for people to find a mechanism to how can they provide feedback to the city and where can they go.
That was good. Kathy, before.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that if you expect a group to deal with 13 neighborhoods, it could be viewed as diluting influence versus being able to speak directly to Zavi or a single representative.
Yeah.
They might have to repeat their message over and over again.
Okay.
I would say that we have an opportunity to have more of our outreach efforts in dual languages, or to have them possibly reviewed for response to underrepresented communities.
Spanish language materials.
Yeah. If I do an invite for our annual meeting, could I have somebody translate that? Not having someone currently that does Spanish, speaks Spanish on my board or that I know of in my neighborhood.
Now, keeping with the theme of the NLA being the focus, is that something that is of interest or you see as an opportunity for an advisory committee, like having agendas in Spanish? Is that kind of what you're thinking?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But I guess for that, I would go back to your relationship. Is that even helpful?
That's a great question. And that's something that I don't want to speak for an entire group, right? But I would say maybe not the best use of resources and time. So where an alternative is to have a liaison within that neighborhood or that group to identify and know where those folks are in your neighborhood or in your area, and then connect with, in that region. One of the community groups that I work with is the Latino liaisons within the school district, right? So there's Bear Creek in that area, connecting with that person and giving them the information that you have on your agendas. So there's opportunities to create a pipeline and kind of be able to have those folks identified.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can share, that's, I'm thinking more in terms of the neighborhood associations and how we're bridging partnerships with some of, Zavi's people and what I call you my people. Because you are my neighborhood. And so, yeah, Zavi and I being able to work together, there's an event coming up in July, that's the Alpenglow park opening. And that is something that there are 3 neighborhoods participating in: Old Farm District, Larkspur, and then the Southeast Bend area. And that is a collaboration between Ben Parks and Rec, the city, Ben Fire is going to try and be there. Zavi's community partners are going to have tables too. So almost like a one-stop shop for community building and learning about what's happening within your area. We also talked about having like the Go Bond projects within that area, having the team there so they can answer questions. And so you don't have to go to 50 meetings with different entities, and you can spend more time like focusing on family and also getting information, building relationships. So we've got a couple of things that we're trying that with, and we'll see how it goes this summer.
I think the sentiment around that too is like exposure, right? So again, one of the themes in mine too is like not having a relationship or just not understanding what's out there. And then again, like just being there takes time, and being able to show up consistently with these different events, I think is super helpful to be able to build that over time.
Yeah.
I wonder if there might be an opportunity for the city to open this room during off hours for a venue where I do think people would come if we advertised.
I believe we have that in our code. We have to do that.
I mean, I'd be curious, going back to the overlap with the work Zavi's been doing. Like I get excited at the thought that as we rebrand kind of who we are and why we are and how we operate, the question of that we being answered by neighborhood associations that are encouraging our neighbors to have these authentic, ongoing, actual human connections with each other in a diverse way that is respectful. And, I think there's a big learning curve there, but wouldn't that be amazing if, we got back to the root of what it means to be a neighborhood and really sharing life together and listening to one another and caring for one another. The NA is being a vehicle for that in some way, and learning to be more inclusive in an authentic way gets me really excited, because I don't think Zavi or the city can do that. I mean, you can build that relationship and be that consistent person, but like to have neighborhoods mobilized to care for one another in a very real way is a beautiful vision, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that it kind of, we've seen this on the NLA, right? The struggle, the turnover, the multiple representatives doing multiple jobs for their neighborhood associations. And I think those grassroots efforts, that connection that you're talking about, that exposure, helping rebrand like who we are and what we can do, will only lead to a more strong advisory committee, and stronger voice.
Elizabeth Rhodes has her hand raised.
Elizabeth.
Thanks. I think mine is ties into what Karen said under weaknesses, but I can also look at it as an opportunity, and that is improving our ability to communicate in different ways. So I know that our particular NA board is not super up to speed on social media. And it seems like that is a good way to communicate with a lot of people. It's an opportunity. But then for our board, it's also a weakness that we have. Nobody is really very good or consistent or using social media communication lines in ways that I think could enhance our ability to communicate with our neighborhoods.
Yeah, that's a challenge in my neighborhood. I was encouraging the board to create a audio visual or a IT kind of position on the board, possibly to bring in newer, younger folks, but just to maybe make it easier, because it's a big burden. Me as chair was trying to do all that and was like being in a tidal wave.
I guess I'm gonna transition on over to our threat side. And again, please know, like if you sleep on this and you think of more things, you're welcome to send them my way. and I'll include them on this. This is accessible to all of you. It is just the Miro board. So the last piece of this is the threats. So our weaknesses likely to make us critically vulnerable. What external roadblocks exist that could prevent us from moving forward as a committee? Is there significant change coming? Election season is on the horizon. Go ahead, Kathy.
I think that the lack of affordable housing, that people end up feeling crammed into a neighborhood. I mean, they have to grab at whatever's available, not necessarily in the part of town that they would want to live in. You know, there's not much choice if you move to Bend, and that doesn't contribute much to people feeling part of the neighborhood. I have to say that I am from a neighborhood that is probably more oriented towards people wanting their independence and not seeking closeness and interaction with others. But also the way the city has developed with different large commercial areas and then different large residential areas does not contribute to in neighborhood interaction.
So,
but I know that the state is going to do that through that new effort on walkable cities. It's not the name of it, but that's kind of what they're going to try to do.
I'm going to add perception of what council and the YIMBY community thinks that NAs are, because not every NA is a NIMBY. So I think that's something I consider a threat. It's like, how do we improve the perception of who we are?
YIMBY is what?
oh yes. Yes in my backyard versus no, not in my backyard.
Thank you.
Well, I know from my own perspective is that within, I don't know, 5 to 10 years, Southern Crossing will quadruple the number of housing units. Will be one of the more dense versus one of the smallest. And so as change comes, and we can see it coming, we know it's out there, how do we change the way our neighborhood operates and react, not responding to it, but embracing it in our neighborhood association?
The continued confusion between HOAs and NAs.
Thanks, Dave.
I want to clarify, we're really good at reacting land use and doing that, but to me, it's more the personal connectivity and how do you build that in? And some of it might be common meeting spaces into the designs of these future neighborhoods. I don't know.
That sounds like an opportunity.
Yeah, I will put it on that side.
Remember.
Yes, switch screens.
Doing great.
Chris, looks like you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I think partisanship is also a threat to the effectiveness of both NAs and the NLAs. I think there's issues like houselessness and affordable housing that easily slip into being perceived as one way or another in our partisan society these days. And I think that's something that we're really careful with at ABNA to present ourselves in ways that don't fall on one side or the other of issues. And I think that's something that NLA needs to be careful of too.
Thank you.
To that end, and maybe this is more of an opportunity, but I know that I am still growing as a representative in being able to articulate not only my my perspective on things and of those who share my perspective on things, but being able to come and say, and I've also heard this, and really representing diverse voices. So I wonder if there's an opportunity for, I don't know if it's training necessarily, but just growing awareness by those of us who serve as representatives to to say, all right, yes, this is in sort of my worldview. This is what I would naturally say. And probably knowing the world we live in, probably that's our circle that's around us too. But being curious about people who might disagree with us and still bringing those perspectives in as faithful a way as we can, even if we don't share them.
I guess a threat too is how do people that live in Bend define a neighborhood?
Yeah. I mean, we have such a variety of opinions between the 13 neighborhoods.
Right. Because ours is, I wouldn't really call it a neighborhood. It is because the city defined us as geographic, but we're not physically close to each other either.
Well, look at Mountain View.
Yeah.
It's huge and it's made of giant pieces of things that don't interface. They're adjacent to each other.
Hand raised. Can't speak.
Elizabeth, let's go to you first.
Okay, sorry. That makes me remember the conversation or the mention of maybe renaming neighborhood association to neighborhood district. And I mean, I don't know if that's a threat exactly, but maybe that would help clarify and separate from the HOA confusion. And I do think that when people think of their neighborhood, they're sort of thinking of the houses right around them even. So it's a much smaller perspective that I think that many people have when they think of their neighborhood. It's just sort of their block on their street or the people that back up to their backyards, just a really pretty small thing.
Right now with construction, there's West Larkspur and East Larkspur.
All right, so we're about to transition over into the next couple of items on our agenda. So before we do that, are there any last thoughts? Oh, Steve, I'm so sorry. Oh, if you're talking, Steve, we can't hear you.
No, I'm just now unmuted. One of the threats that I see, I think I've been on the board for 2 years now, and I've been in Bend for 3. As an education guy, that's my background. I'm always interested in why there's not more young people, students particularly, neither high school nor even at the university levels, incorporated into some of these conversations. And I've made some efforts to get out there and do something, but I just think the threat is that if we don't reach that population, we're just going to continue to lose credibility. So I'd like to see some of that go on.
Thank you.
Sorry, I know we're trying to move on, Michaela, but connected to that, and I'm glad you put the economic conditions question on there, is I think one of those challenges and why maybe younger people or folks from different groups aren't able to participate is that economic consideration, whether that's time or finances, availability of childcare. Time is precious right now, and not everybody can invest that kind of time when they're just trying to make it and fill their car with gas. I mean, I think this is, and on the other end, or maybe this is just a strength. I won't make you put a post-it way back there, but like the magic of being hybrid right now is pretty cool. I think we've learned to do that in some amazing ways that can help with some of those barriers. But I think we need to keep exploring how to remove barriers and help people be able to participate in this changing economic climate.
Like it. I don't want to lose it, so. Okay, any other final thoughts?
Yeah, I was kind of curious about that comment. I guess it was Steve did about youth involvement, and I saw the city council just brought on that fellow that's 27, I believe, and I was wondering if Michaela, you or any others involved in the city can speak to that. Was that an important consideration in that selection? And that just seems like a really important point that Steve made.
Sure. Are you willing?
I mean, yeah, I could just say that there were first ways that I personally felt that Councillor Segal was going to be an amazing counselor. And I think he also, in addition to his personal story and his sort of lived and work experience, yeah, it was really great that someone was willing to step up to council that was younger than all of us on council, and did look different and was renting in our city. And so I think that he is going to really be an important piece of our council going forward.
Were you able to hear all of that, Steve?
Sometimes you have
Oh, Chris. Sorry, it was Chris.
Yeah, I was. I
right.
appreciate it. Thank you.
I heard it as well. Thanks.
Great. Good. Okay. So before I kick off, well, yeah, I think let's just move on to the next topic. And like I said, if you continue to come back to this, thinking about it, if you have more ideas, if you want to go to coffee and talk about any of this, I'm always willing to do so, especially now that we're getting back out there in person. So with that, I'm going to stop my screen share.
That was great stuff, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much for the input. As I mentioned, we're just going to continue to distill down all of this great info that we've learned and hopefully come up with some ideas and how we can move the program forward. But we're going to give you a little bit of a break this summer while we're doing all of that great brainstorming. Okay. So the next, oh, sorry, Kathy, this goes back to you. I'm done with my portion.
Okay, so much for number 5, SWOT assessment. Now we have number 6, standing items, 10 minutes, committee appointment process and working groups. So we're going to start with the committee appointment process.
Yeah, I got a couple of questions from you guys about what the timeline is for appointments, especially because it looks like five folks are going to be cycling out in July. So for those who have terms coming to an end, and forgive me that I don't have it in front of me. Thanks. Kayla's going to get those.
Looks like Chris Pearson, Kathy, Lisa, Cassie, Jim, and Sean McFadden.
And I have heard from Chris Pearson and Jim Christo that they intend to renew in July. So we'll be working on putting those recommendations through to council. As for the remainders, we included them in a press release or a media release that went out last week, advertising that we had NLA openings. Those openings or applications are being received up until July 3rd at 5 p.m. So it's a Sunday night. So we'll give people that time to apply. As those come in, I'm sending them back out to the neighborhood associations so that you can be the ones to follow up, interview applicants, figure out who you want to put forward to the council for consideration. So we will have, let's see, if you get the applications, I'm trying to get them all to you as they come in so that we're not waiting until June 3rd. But the plan is to have appointments on the July 20th council agenda. So that gives a little bit of time for your boards to make decisions and get me your recommendations and for me to provide those to city council. Did that answer all of your questions, Cassie?
Well, so Michaela, so if this is my last meeting, what happens the second week of July if we don't have a representative then?
Right. So my hope is that we're going to talk about elections in a second. And if no one is stepping forward for that chair position or to fill the chair role, what I'm going to do is spend the July meeting getting these new folks onboarded, and then working on maybe generating some of that leadership interest so that in August, we can come back and hopefully with the new leadership within the
I was pleased to see that the city was asking for volunteers. And my opinion is that if the city could take over more of the recruiting for members for the NAs and board members for the NAs, it would be a great help because the city has a wider reach and a deeper reach into the communication systems of Bend than any of the individual NAs have. So I would be pleased if the city and the city council would use more of its communication skills to help us recruit not just board members, but members for the NAs.
Okay, thank you, Dave.
Hey, Michaela, can I just confirm?
Yeah.
So that we have several applications that are in. So if we forward those to you, the appointment process won't really be official until July 20th.
Right. Council takes a break at the first meeting of July, so there's not going to be one on the 6th. And the other option is tomorrow, which is not going to happen. So we have that time to go through those applications and then provide me with those recommendations. I also want to be mindful and give council a little bit of time to follow up on those as well, so that they can do their own vetting of candidates, if you will.
Just so we're good. I didn't realize we're working it into the proper process, but there might be a break. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and just a reminder, you can go back to the NLA handbook on page 22. There is a process for recommending, so it gives you the exact steps on how to give me those recommendations and what's going to happen from there.
And that's on the NLA webpage. Supposed to, we haven't read that in the last.
Right, NLA handbook. You should be reading this nightly.
I want to ask what's on page 14, Michaela.
So Michaela,
One
second.
So if
I was just going to ask, is the city going to evaluate how effective your own outreach is to get applicants from diverse community?
Yeah,
because it seems like that would be a learning lesson for all of us.
Yeah, we're talking about that now. And I think one of the conversations we hope to bring to you is the Stipends Program. So we're looking at the ways that we're doing our applications. We have demographic questions now. So I think we're trying to fine tune that. And we're also trying some things internally to see if it's working. And I know Zavi and Anna have a lot of great input on it. So we might be able to connect you outside of the meeting to talk.
But I guess I wonder, using the skills and the tools that you have, and we're trying to reach more applicants, right? Does it work or not?
Does it work or not? Go ahead.
I think it's going to take time. I think we're going to try to be like innovative. I think, Michaela alluded to being at the community celebration for Parks and Rec at Alpenglow. So again, kind of getting that exposure, kind of vetting some of my partners that I have right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I sent it out. Yeah, I think last week, kind of the openings that we have currently through NAs, NLAs,
Mm-hmm.
and again, kind of seeing what happens, what hopes will recruit some folks there. And again, unfortunately, I think it'll just take some time to kind of see and encourage folks and through some of these processes, and hopefully like revamping is like, let's get together at the park in the area and have like, something that we gather and then be able to recruit there as well. Kind of so different forms of recruitment as opposed to maybe like an all email to like, groups or just traditional ways of how we've done it.
Yeah. I think you talked about it in the past, it's relationship building too. And so this, for one, is the first time that we've had someone in a position like Zavi that has relationships that he came here with. but also is continuing to steward those, get out there and talk about city programs, make basic information available to groups that maybe haven't seen it before, and providing that awareness. So we're hoping it is grassroots and it's a culture shift. And so there's a lot of work that it might not happen overnight.
I was going to say, short, thinking about it, it's a very short turnaround.
Yeah.
For this,
You're right. For this round.
No,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I love the NLAs. I'm a huge believer in like the opportunities that it provides, especially for like my council like assessment. I think it's broken up so well within like the regions and in the areas. So again, like any opportunities that I have when I'm working with some of my community partners, being able to kind of talk about that and what that means and what that looks like has been, I think, a great opportunity as well. But again, like the ROI on that, I think we're going to see at the same time.
Let's see.
Okay, so we have committee appointment process.
Yes, so that was committee appointment process. If you have other questions, feel free to give me a call.
Well, so Michaela, I just have to ask, so so basically there's a gap for us on July 12th. There's nobody representing our board or our neighbor association until we get a new point.
Yeah, so regardless of whether someone steps up tonight as a chair or vice chair, we're not going to be meeting as an NLA in July. We're going to take that off so that we can get the new folks appointed, try to schedule orientations with them and bring them up to speed.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Thank you. Thank you.
That's okay.
And a lot of groups aren't meeting in July. You're not being like punished in any way, shape, or form. Just want to make that clear.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear that you're going to provide some orientation and training. Dave Johnson has mentioned that a number of times, that that's one of his concerns.
Yeah.
And I know that whoever comes forth from Bona is not going to have any background, so.
Sure. Yeah, and you're welcome to attend that too. So once I get the orientation set up, I'll let you know. And if you want to be a part of that, you're welcome to, because you're going to have the knowledge to share with people who are stepping into your positions.
We have a hand up.
Steve.
It's not speaking.
Steve.
You have your hand up, Steve Fine.
Trying to find unmute.
Yep, I got it. Yeah, thanks. So when you went through the list of both sides of that, well, both lists, those who are staying, those who are not, and my name was not mentioned, but I am, as you know, leaving. We are, all of you are invited to the Al Moody Park event that we're going to have on this Thursday at 5 o'clock. There's music and ice cream and pizza and a whole bunch of cool stuff. So it is another recruiting event. And I know that Michaela and some of the others from the city are going to be there as well. We have 21 tables that are going to be represented in that park. So it might be an interesting, I'm hoping that someone from the city, Michaela, Zavi, somebody's going to get up there and help us recruit for members as well as NLA people. But in any event, Michaela, I'm just confirming that you have me on the list for those who are departing.
Yes, absolutely. So Steve's last meeting with us is going to be in August. So Mountain View was included in that media release that went out as well. So they're doing some recruiting as well.
I saw that in the ad on TV.
Yes.
So yeah, thanks.
Can you move the cursor off Steve's face?
Oh,
Just.
oh, Kayla.
Sorry.
Thank you.
My apologies.
Just right on.
Okay, so we've kind of done committee appointment process, working groups. Is that like land use working group and others?
A little bit. I sent out an email last month asking if anyone was interested in volunteering on a short-term rental working group. And that came after Lisa made the suggestion at the May 16th meeting that we pull that together. So I'm looking for interest in that group. And so far I've heard from Chris Pearson and Sean McFadden, I believe. Yeah. So if there's anyone else that would be interested in talking short-term rentals, following what the council's doing with short-term rentals, I think that's what their intent is. There are some changes that are coming. So
Do they have to be from here, the NLA?
I was gonna say, yeah, kind of a board member that would be interested, but not.
I think that's a good question. So let me keep it in mind. I'm going to put down NA members with a question mark. We did do that with the land use networking, or see, now I've got them confused. Land use working group when we were working on land use education, because it was such a large workload. In this case, I'm not sure what we're looking at yet. So I just wanted to see who wanted to talk about it.
I'd be curious, I don't know if this is even relevant, but what the council would be looking for from that working group would be helpful to understand just what's their scope.
Yeah, there isn't one right now. And so that's kind of, we've said that right now council's gathering data. They've made a couple of like recommendations, but at this point, there's nothing to react to. So it would be kind of posturing, getting ready for that conversation, if you will. But I know we like to be early. So if I know who's interested, we can hit the go button when we need to. Yes.
I served on the short-term rental task force. And I'd be interested in.
Thank you. Okay, so that's it for right now with that agenda item.
I think something about short-term rentals should go into the SWOT. I know nobody brought it up, but we've had a lot of past conversations about it. How does it influence neighborhood character?
Okay. Maybe assessments.
Can you all in council chambers speak up? It's really hard to hear.
Yes, thanks for letting us know, Dave.
Okay, so are we on to 7 elections and next steps?
We sure are.
We don't have very much time left, 20 minutes till we're.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how long this will take, but for everyone, Kathy obviously is stepping down this month as vice chair. Summer has announced that she's stepping down as well. And so we are looking for a new chair at minimum to continue meeting as an NLA. After having talked to several of you, I don't know that we have anyone who's interested in stepping into that role. So I want to share a little bit. I'll put it back out there in case any of you slept on it and changed your minds. But I did want to let you know what would happen if we don't have someone. So at this time, the NLA would stay a committee written in code, but we would move to an inactive status, which means that we are not meeting, but we still are active as a committee in a sense that I, as your staff liaison, will be keeping you informed about what is happening with city council agendas, programs, what we're looking at, what you might be interested in. Neighborhood associations still have your voice. So I'll keep you informed and hopefully you still can use those platforms if you feel like you need to. In the meantime, I would be working on getting those 6 or so new folks into these roles in July so that maybe in August we'll have some leadership interest. Some of you will know better where you're at that point as well and what you're looking at the future. So that it kind of looks like a little bit of a summer break to get in this new transition of committee members and then restart up in the fall. And that's the hope through all of this.
Michaela, we'd basically be inactive in July anyway.
Yes.
But for all intents and purposes.
Right. Chris.
Michaela, are we likely to get new members though if the NLA is not meeting and active?
Hey, I think that's a great great question. But as Morgan said, we wouldn't be meeting in July anyways. And so I don't think that we would appear inactive in any way. As we got these new members in, we would just be taking a hiatus for a month. But that being said, recognize that new members don't always feel like stepping into leadership roles when they've just gotten appointed. And I know how many of you feel about having someone in a role that understands neighborhood associations. So I think these are considerations that you can take with a grain of salt. And Chris, does that answer your question?
I'd just like to add in that I haven't found that being the vice chair or stepping in behind Summer and basically being the acting chair has taken a lot of extra time or effort. It has changed my perspective slightly, but that's just in case you want to say, oh, I don't want to put any more time in. Well, it's not very much more time. But it is an interesting role, so.
Yeah. There are, if you're wondering about the commitment, it's typically at minimum an additional meeting with me and Counselor Perkins sometimes is there to set agendas for upcoming NLA meetings. It is facilitating the meetings when you are here. And then from that, you can really do with it what you want. Summer has really tried to build council connections. I know she's met with Counselor Perkins. She met with Mayor Russell, really trying to understand what is it that they're wanting from a committee. So she went above and beyond that minimum. However, it did lead to a little bit of burnout for her. So I want to be mindful of that as well and let you know that I'm here as your staff support to help you through that.
Michaela, is there a structure for like an interim, so like knowing that we're gonna have so many members, hopefully coming on board as brand new folks that might not want to step right into vice chair or chair role. Is there a framework for having an interim role?
I would say
while they get their feet wet and then
woo
them into further leadership.
I think so, because notice too, like our council is going through a large transition time as well. We have elections coming up in the fall. We don't know what that means for the city. And so with like the NLA, typically most advisory committees do an election of chair and vice chair once a year. We've done it 3 times in the last year, but it's typically in January. And so there could be an opportunity if someone wanted to step in. I mean, we're going to be revoting in January. It says that in the code. So that would be an interim solution. And that's whether anyone here wanted to do that, or if someone that was new wanted to take a shot at it and see how it went for them. That's a good opportunity. It ends up being 4 months, 5 months, I think. Okay, here's the big question. Is there anyone out there that would like to throw their hat in the ring for a chair or a vice chair role? I guess chair would be preferred. Chris.
No, I'm not, and for the reasons that I spoke with you yesterday. But I did want to say that if we're speaking of threats in that SWOT process, this impediment to continuation does seem to be a really significant threat to the viability of the NLA. And what I was wondering was whether the city could become more active in recruiting a chair without at the same time letting on that there's a weakness in the NLA in the sense that we don't have somebody willing to come forward to chair. I just think it's fairly critical. I mean, in my short term here, I haven't been here all that long, but it does strike me as critical if we're going to continue to have the NLA be a significant viable process or committee, that we do need to take this move more seriously in terms of finding a chair.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a little bit to that as well with the recommendation layer from the neighborhood association. So I can go out and do my best to find someone that wants to lead an advisory committee, but what neighborhood association they live in, or whether or not they are a good fit for your board. I think we're going to have to work together on that. And I promise I will do my darndest to convince all of you to take the chair role at some point. But until that point, I hear you, and I will add that leadership as a threat on our SWOT assessment. Also, are you putting your hand in the ring?
Kind of looks like Sean.
I guess, Michaela, related to that, is there a way in the interim that we could do a rotating, almost like facilitator role, not chair, between August and November? Like each of us up here could take a month, and we could be that. Do it that way. If there's baby steps rather than the whole enchilada kind of thing.
I like that idea.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, I can look into what some of our options are. I think there's some of these things I don't know what we can and can't do. So I need to look into that ability. And I mean, if we leave with me doing more investigative work, I'm happy to do that. So.
Michaela, if that's not possible, November looks a little interesting for me too, but I'd be happy to serve in an interim role in August, September, and October.
Okay. And someone said Sean raised his hand, so I didn't want.
Unless Sean raised his hand.
Oh, that was a tease. He just-
Eyes got really big there for a second.
Okay. With that, unless someone wants to jump in and say, I want to be your chair, what I will do is take this and go back and figure out maybe what some of our options are for that interim chair, and then report back to you guys as soon as I have responses.
We would need to change the processes and procedures
Yeah.
in order to make that happen. But I think in the far term, it would be great to have some kind of a rotation, because it would bring everybody into the process as well as the fundamentals of the NLA.
Okay.
To have some kind of a rotating leadership. I don't know what you'd call it, administrative. Or, anyway, I'll go back and look at our processes and procedures and see if there's a way that we can tweak to have some kind of a rotating leadership role.
Okay. Yeah, and maybe we can pull a group together to look at those as well. And if we do need to change those, so that's something I'll check on.
Okay, I would volunteer to help with that.
Okay. But Dave, you're done. You were free.
I understand, but I don't want to see the baby that I nurtured die for the lack of leadership.
Sure. I understand and appreciate.
So here's,
Thank you. Yes.
so for those of us that are off, we can be at large.
Sorry, what was that?
I'm just saying is that even though we're stepping off the board, we can be available at large.
Okay, yeah, as like mentors, if you will,
Or an advisory board.
and advisory.
Yeah, that's what we needed.
It's a thought. It's a thought. It's just a thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a couple of folks that aren't here too, so I'll want to touch base with them and get their thoughts so that we can make sure that we've got everyone's opinions represented. Okay. Well, I have my marching orders. We have 8 minutes. So instead of our traditional rep reports, Kathy, would you like to give just, if someone has something of importance that they would like to share, they can do that?
Do that in 8 minutes, I think, get everybody in. Is there an order that we should proceed in?
No, I'll just go by hand raises. So if you do have something to share for the group, raise your hand. And we'll go with that. Morgan, we'll start with you.
Just the Larkspur Neighborhood Association Board is meeting on Monday, still virtually. And we'll be sitting down with the leadership from Central Oregon Villages to hear more about their project in Larkspur. And so if people are interested, that'll be a good one to listen in on.
What time?
A great question. I believe it's at 6, but I'm going to tell you for sure in a second. Keep going.
Chris.
As you've heard, there are changes at Old Bend. John Fisher has been elected by our board to chair the board out of great effectiveness. He's city designer and architect with Ashley Vance. Karen Hardy is a very active kind of administrative assistant. She doesn't like the term secretary or anything like that. She's very into things. Richard Ross remains as vice chair. And I apparently have 1 more year of a term, and I expect to be here at every meeting.
Thank you. Morgan says their event was at 6 p.m. Sorry, I was like, and that's the meeting about the Central Oregon Villages.
It'll be our regular board meeting, but we've invited the leadership from Central Oregon Villages to share.
Karen.
I was going to share the amphitheater came to our last board meeting because we get a lot of noise complaints about the concerts. And that they explained to us the changes they made and that concerts are held to 100 decibels or less and that they have to end by 10. But, and there's a number, that's actually what I was looking at. They gave us a phone number to call if people had complaints. And they're monitoring their changes to see if it helps. They want to work with the community. And so I thought that was a very useful presentation. So I should get the phone number to the other NAs so that if you get complaints through your land use, that they have a mechanism of talking to the staff.
That's great. If you want to share that with me, I can send it around.
Yeah.
Just for talking to the amphitheater though.
Not general noise complaints.
Yeah.
I don't know if you can hear it in Boyd Acres.
No, the 10 Barrel is known for getting a lot of noise.
Got it.
Oh, yeah, no, this is amphitheater staff.
So, and Old Bend is getting input from developers south of Arizona. So we have an audience with in Kettleson, I think it is. But there's big buildings coming soon.
Yeah.
And obviously we worry about cut through traffic.
Who's watching the hands raised?
Yeah, there's a couple of.
We're going around the table.
Going slow. I just want to say that Vana is having its annual meeting. We're having a picnic at Rock Ridge Park. And so we are hoping to create a whole new board because we only have one holdover person. And I don't know what Michaela's going to do when there is no board and there is no NLA rep, but I think she's going to come and do a dance and group people.
Abby, for what it's worth, I saw that on Facebook. So it's working. The event popped up.
Oh, yeah.
It's a good job.
Yeah, except that our communications chair or person doesn't do Facebook. So we have.
Yeah. Let me know if you need help. We can try to get the word out there.
Okay. So now we're going to go to hands raised on the virtual portion of, I think everybody who's here got a chance to speak. Okay. So how about Elizabeth? Make it real quick.
Yep, thank you. The Deschutes South Canyon Youth Survey that was a collaboration between Southwest Bend, Southern Crossing, and Century West closed out with 2,039 responses. And we were really excited to get over 1,000 people contributing. And we're working on an executive summary that we will share with everyone. And I wanted to just say thank you so much to the other ends for spreading the word. We had responses from all 13 neighborhoods. So that was really great. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, Steve Pine.
Yeah, thanks. I wanted to know if we can share that presentation that you gave us today, Michaela, if you're going to be sending that out.
Yeah, definitely. So I'll send it out again following the meeting with a couple of the next steps for everyone.
Great. Also, don't forget Al Moody Park over here in Northeast. Location 5 to 8. Free ice cream and pizza. By Coyote Will.
Music.
Anyway.
Thank you.
Okay. Jim Christo next.
Yeah. For Southeast Bend, we're basically moving forward on the July 15th grand opening extravaganza at Alpenglow Park. We had a status meeting with the city today. That date looks set in concrete now. There's going to be a soft opening where they'll actually open the park, but it may not happen for another week and a half due to the continuing amount of rain that we've had, and there's certain things that are not done yet. So we've got about 3 vendors that are food vendors are coming, and quite a number of other organizations that are coming, and then we'll have tables for not only Southeast Bend but Old Farm District NA as well. We've run into an issue with printing. Apparently printing costs have gone way up, and the Bend Parks and Rec Department is not going to send out a postcard to the area they usually do because the cost was just prohibitive. And so Michaela, Jim Drophy and I want to get talk with you about tomorrow to find out a path forward. So
Yes.
just let us know when you're available. That's all I have. Thanks.
We'll do that.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else?
I don't see any more hands.
Yeah, I have just a quick update. I noticed on the council agenda for tomorrow that there's going to be a work session on unsanctioned camping. And so that might be of interest to some of you. Those are recorded, so if you can't attend, the work sessions typically start at 5 p.m. And that was not under agenda item 8. So I wanted to draw your attention to that.
I just want to add, it's been a great experience. I've loved the NLA. I'm sad to leave. It's been really a fabulous opportunity. So thank you all.
Thank you, Cassie, for 4 years, well, and more. I mean, on a committee that exists, but you also helped getting it started. And you too, Dave. We really appreciate you guys. I also, just a quick plug, just because I know it affects all of you. I purchased a mailing list. So we have a brand new mailing list that you can use for events that are coming up, and it should be ready tomorrow with the new addresses, updated addresses. Again, that is all businesses and people, anybody that's registered with the post office within city limits. And we did like that association. So is that you're reaching way more than just using the city data lists.
That's awesome. Thanks, Michaela. And thanks,
All right.
Kayla.
Yeah, thank you, Kayla. We couldn't do this without you.
Kayla.
All right, everyone online, have a good night, and we'll see you